Hey, what's up guys? So today I wanted to do a video about some of the strange arguments that I've heard within the photography community. And if you guys have been around for a while, you've probably heard a lot of these just randomly in passing in comments and different things. And I find a lot of them to be a little bit strange. The first one that I'm going to go into, it happens to be about exposure times. I've heard arguments about exposures that are too long, and I've heard arguments against exposures that are too short. Of course, too short of a exposure will freeze action in a way that's unnatural to the human eye and shows something that we can't physically see ourselves, and I guess that's basically the crux of the argument. I've seen the same thing about long exposure times, and basically, you know, that the length of the exposure shows something unnatural to the human eye as well. Me personally, I've shot both of those types of photos depending on the situation, and I find it a little silly to limit your creative options to just physically what you would be able to see with the human eye. Another one that I've seen is usually directed more toward shallow depth of field than deeper depth of field. But, you know, I've seen arguments that, you know, basically go, don't use shallow depth of field, it's silly, blah, 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 that's not how the human eye sees, etc., etc. Well, the human eye, as you guys know, manipulates what it sees and interprets it for us into our brains, and actually does a physical manipulation of what we see beyond what just our eyes can see. So to me, you know, the depth of field, I mean, that's just, it comes to what you're trying to shoot in the photo. If you want everything in focus, if you want only a little bit in focus, I don't see the point in being sort of elitist about, you know, one way or the other. I mean, I just can't understand that. I've seen the same argument against photo stacking for deep depth of field as well. You know, if you want everything in focus, sometimes you have to overcome the physical limitations of the gear you're using, something like that. So to me, both of those arguments are kind of funny. One that I've seen a lot is that gear just doesn't matter, and I understand the point that they're trying to convey, which is basically that, you know, skill trumps whatever gear you're using. But at the same time, gear does matter depending on what you're trying to do with it. You know, you've seen those cheap camera challenges and stuff on YouTube. And, you know, while it's true that a good photographer can make a photo from one of those cameras better, there are a lot of things that they can't do with those photos afterwards. You might be able to post it to Instagram as a sort of see, look what I can do kind of thing. But if you were to try to use those files for something, then most likely they're going to break down. The, you know, argument really comes down to people that are saying, hey, you have a good bit of gear, just use it, don't worry about, you know, constantly chasing better gear. And I get that, and I agree with that. But at the same time, you know, being able to claim that argument is a luxury for people that already have decent gear. And so, you know, if a professional had all their gear come up missing or whatever, I guarantee the next day they won't be saying gear doesn't matter. They'll be going out trying to find all the lenses, the cameras that they need to get back into their work. So to me, that argument is kind of funny, and I understand it to a point, but it doesn't negate the necessity of good gear for people that are trying to print large files, deliver for stock photography or for clients, stuff like that. You just can't use just anything and expect it to work out. That said, most decent cameras anywhere over $500 these days will provide a good product. It's just a matter of the controls and functions on the camera, how you access those controls, and thus how quickly you can use your gear, because even entry-level cameras are just fantastic today. The rest of it is just sort of, stuff that photographers like to argue about. So don't worry about that. I agree, don't worry about the gear so much. Shoot, that's really what it comes down to. One thing that I find interesting, and I went to the Art Institutes many years ago, and it was one of the most fruitful times of my life for my art, and I learned a lot from being around so many fantastic artists and stuff at that time, and that helped me a lot. But one thing that I saw a lot, and I've seen in different contexts, is sort of what I call like an art snob thing. And what I'm really getting down to, it's the people that put up a sculpture of cheese and they say, what does it mean? And they come up with all kinds of very introspective, idealistic things that they want to explain and what they think it means. The same thing happens in photography, and for example, I do a lot of landscape photography. A lot of it's pretty, but it doesn't really mean something a lot past what I intend it to mean, which is look at the beauty of nature, and to me that means something. But as far as it goes, some photographers put out work that really does have a lot of meaning, in storytelling and that sort of thing. And I agree that that's a fantastic ideal to push towards, but what I don't think it means is that all other work is invalid or unimportant. And, so I see a lot of people sort of putting up esoteric arguments about, oh, this photo of a person sitting in a chair in a house, it means something really important. And sometimes it does, but most of the time it's just sort of funny artist self-importance, in my opinion. So I just thought that maybe some of you guys would understand and agree with that. One argument I've seen a lot is that you just don't need a tripod, for example. And while for some types of photography it's true that you don't, or you can actually make a logical choice to just decide not to use one for convenience, for speed of shooting, that sort of thing. What it's going to do is actually limit your options in the field. And while for some of us that's a perfectly logical choice, sometimes if you want to do other types of photography, that's not an option. So, I've seen a lot of arguments saying, hey, I just find a rock or put the camera on the ground or whatever the case may be. And while that works sometimes, it doesn't work all the time. So for me, I think it's an interesting argument, and often when I go out shooting, I make gear reduction choices. I'm only taking this camera, this lens, whatever the case may be, and I do limit myself. But I find it important to realize that there are only certain types of photography you can do if you do not carry a tripod, in general. I use that same argument when it comes to film photography, that it forces you to slow down and be more thoughtful about what you're doing and things like that. And mostly in all ways, it's actually a placebo effect of sorts, because for a lot of us that started in film photography, you don't just go out and spray and pray with a digital camera just because you can. Yeah, it's sort of a discipline thing that you carry with you. And some of us, you can have discipline and not go out and do that. But for others, it's sort of like an addiction kind of thing. Some of us have that self-control, and some of us just don't. So for the people that feel better by it, go ahead and do that, but understand that it's more of a mental limitation than a physical one. Okay, so here's one that I've seen a lot that I find interesting, and this to me is important because in today's world with the internet and so many fantastic places being photographed on a daily basis, you know, humanity has found a lot of, if not all of the major, like, you know, what I will call, like, you know, top 10 places in the world, top 20 places in the world. The big trademark locations, most of those have probably already been found and been shot already by photographers. And so what that means to me is that, you know, you can either go out and just shoot more average, more normal, everyday situations and put your own spin on it and make it beautiful and creative, and there's a lot you can do with that. But what I, you know, find is that you know, I find a lot of photographers saying, "Oh, I don't want to bother shooting that because it's all been done before, et cetera, et cetera." And you know, we're talking about sort of being an anti-establishment type of attitude. And what I'm trying to get at is that, you know, if you want to be that way and just avoid shooting whatever's been shot before, then yeah, go ahead and do that. But the way I look at it is I'm going to try to shoot everything I can, everything that's beautiful, and try to put my own spin on it and hope that other people see it that way as well. You know, I shoot a lot of more mundane things as well, but what I find is that it doesn't degrade the quality on a place that's a fantastic location either. So, you know, do as you wish with that, but just a little something I wanted to share. Another one that I've seen is a lot of photographers that don't like either high key or low key images. So if it's too overexposed, too high key, I don't like it. I'm not going to appreciate it. Same thing with low key photography. I've seen that done that way as well. If it's underexposed, a lot of shadows and silhouettes, I'm not going to like it. You know, so, you know, contrast lies in the same area, basically, more or less. If it's low contrast, high contrast, you see the same arguments across that. And to me, all of those are silly. There's a time and place for every, for all those types, depending on the image and the situation and the client's expectations as well. What do clients want to see from you, et cetera, et cetera. So to me, it's another limitation that I'm not willing to just accept and to put my foot down on. You know, I've seen a lot of people saying you have to create your own style, and for some people that's their way of doing that. I'm not doing that, you know, but, you know, if you want to, I just want you to have a more meaningful, introspective understanding of these arguments within the photographic community and why they occur. So I've seen the same thing on to crop or not to crop, and with some people saying that it's insincere to make a crop on a photo after the fact in post. You know, me personally, if I've taken a photo and cropping it makes it usable, even though it's going to be a slightly smaller file, then I may go ahead and make a crop, just understanding that this photo can only be used for X, Y, and Z projects, and that it may not work for something like a really large print, you know, something like that. To me, it's better than not having a shot. So if it comes down to that, then yeah, I'll go ahead and crop something. But on the other hand, you know, I do try to shoot everything in camera as perfect as I possibly can. I'm not a big Photoshop guy. I don't understand it. I don't know how to do it. So I don't go in and, you know, delete people after the fact and delete power lines and whatever else. I'm not saying that those are, you know, bad or anything like that. I'm just saying that I don't actually know how to do that stuff, and so, you know, I just don't enjoy doing it, so I don't bother learning. So basically for me, I selectively shoot what I want in an image, and you know, sometimes I don't get the shot because I find problems with the shot. So I've seen another interesting argument about composition. You know, of course, there's always the argument about using rules of composition versus not using them. You've probably heard all that before, rules of thirds, you know, don't split in the middle, whatever else. So while rules of composition are helpful, they're not meant to be a fixed rule all the time. Sometimes you can, you know, improve or, you know, make a photo more interesting by breaking rules than following them. But one that I find interesting lately seems to be using foreground elements in a shot versus not. And what I mean by that is putting something in the foreground that then can lead you to having a more three-dimensional photograph. You have an element in the foreground, something in the middle, and a background is more interesting than having just a two-dimensional image that basically, you know, has less elements. And I think that I've taken a lot of photos that are, you know, more two-dimensional. Sometimes it's just due to the geographic location of where I'm at. I do find three-dimensional photos a little more interesting in certain cases. But I've seen a lot of arguments online about, you know, how it's overplayed to put something in the foreground, or that it's, you know, it's not original or whatever. I don't agree with that. You know, some images you can use it, some you don't have to. You don't have to absolutely find a foreground image to make an image good. So, you know, however you guys want to do it, but just another idiosyncrasy, I think, within the photographic community that I just find strange. All right, guys, you know, I'm sure I'll probably come up with a lot more of these, and I'll probably try to, over time, probably put them down in the comments. Maybe you guys will have some to add to it down there. That'd be cool. So anyway, guys, take that as you will. Use it to, you know, help yourself decide what you like, what makes you more creative, etc. But I think also don't be closed-minded towards other people because they don't agree with you on that. Let's just all realize that we're all photographers trying to do the same thing. Maybe get rid of some of the divisiveness within the community, that sort of thing. So anyway, take care, guys, and happy shooting.